Welcome back to the county seat. We are continuing our conversation today on tariffs and their impact on local markets. This always seems to play on the national newscasts, but the impacts at home, as you can begin to see, are very real. Joining us for the conversation from the World Trade Center, the CEO, Miles Hansen, and Ron Gibson joins us, who is a dairy farmer of high quality, really good treats out at his dairy farm in Weber County, and he's president of the Utah Farm Bureau. Thank you for both joining us today.
Thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
So I guess I want to start the conversation is there are groups of people that have obviously been helped and hurt by this whole trade war that has just started up. And they kind of knew it was coming and everybody warned about it. I guess my first question is, who's been hurt in Utah? What businesses have been hurt by this?
You know, I think very broadly, the impact of the tariffs that we've placed on imports coming from China and other places and retaliatory tariffs have had a chilling impact on Utah's economy. And you see it in the agriculture industry, which I'll let Ron touch on more, but also you see it across companies who are importing and exporting. So take one example, Varix Imaging. They do high-end components for x-ray, security, screening type equipment. Their stock has dropped over 20% since the beginning of the month. They're a publicly traded company because their supply chain relies on exporting to China components where they get worked on and then re-importing those components. So when they're exporting and importing multiple times throughout their manufacturing process, they're getting killed by tariffs. And so now they employ 1,000 Utahns and they're taking a look at how do they adjust their supply chain, or do they just take their business overseas? And such is one example of the way that the tariffs and retaliatory tariffs are really having an impact on Utah jobs, companies, but also the jobs that they create.
So sometimes it's realistic to assume that a guy's not only going to get tariffed once in his manufacturing process, but tariffed two ways multiple times?
Yeah, exactly right. So if they are, say they're importing components to manufacture them and then they're going to export whatever they've done back to China, they're going to get hit with the tariff on the import in some cases, and then again on the export into China, they'll be hit with a tariff again.
How do you relate the agricultural side to Utah? It's like, you know, practically everybody that I've talked to who's in agriculture in Utah says, well, I don't sell anything to China, I don't sell anything to Canada, I just produce locally. But it still has an impact. How does that work, Ron?
Yeah, the tariffs are agriculture is extremely sensitive to the tariffs because none of the tariffs that we're under now have been placed by our administration, but they are placed by the other countries as retaliatory tariffs towards agriculture. And so let me tell you just a little bit how that works. Pork, for example, right now has a 70% tariff going into Canada or into China, 70%. Okay, so what happens is we have a tremendous amount of our product that has historically gone into China. So when those animals don't go to China, they back up here in the United States. That lowers the price of pork. When you go to the grocery store and pork is basically free. I mean, I was there the other day and you can get $10 off of just about any pork product in the store. So that hurts our beef market, it hurts our poultry market, it hurts all of our other protein products. Mm-hmm. And so that's the same kind of thing with dairy. When we have a dairy product that is not leaving the country that has been exported in the past, then those products stay in our country and that depresses the prices for everybody. So even though many of our agricultural producers from Utah have not historically been exporters, the prices that they receive for their commodities are going to be depressed because there's more of that product on the market.
Can you relate that personally to me? I mean, what kind of impact has that had for you?
Well, over the last 2 months, we have had at least a $70,000 hit at our farm because of the tariffs.
How is that? What is that in relationship to your gross receipts? Is that significant? Is it? I mean,
it is significant.
Is 70% like half, or is it a quarter?
It's about a quarter of our.
So that's enough that it can take your profit margin and make it evaporate.
Not only our profit margin, but I mean, you're seeing, you know, in our state today, I would say that the dairy industry has been hit the hardest by this. From an agricultural perspective, the other industries in the state, the other kind of agricultural industries in the state will be affected in time, just like I talked about through the economic model that I just talked about. But it's not been near as immediate. You know, Mexico right now, well, not right now, but Mexico has been until the 1st of July taking 25% of all of the dairy exports from the United States have gone to Mexico. So when we have a trade war with Mexico, that is a huge problem for us in agriculture.
But isn't there some pressure on the other side? I mean, if China relies on us for pork or soybeans or something to feed their population, they put a tariff on imports. Doesn't that eventually catch up with them?
Yeah, like all disputes or battles or wars, and I don't know exactly if we call this a trade war or a trade dispute or exactly where we are in that continuum, but like in all wars, there's casualties and there's losses on both sides. And so there's no question that in China, they are feeling the impact of the tariffs that they have put in place. I read one article, I believe it was in Reuters a few days ago, talking about looking into November and December, there's question as to whether or not there's going to be a soybean shortage in China itself. So there's no question there's costs on both sides. I think that what is really important as policymakers is to make sure we have a frank understanding of what the costs of the policy really are, and then that we have a clear understanding of what the objectives are of the policy. And then we can ask ourselves, how do we achieve those objectives with the least amount of cost to American companies and consumers?
Knowing that these trade policies were going to create problems, what kind of help has the federal government been willing to or discussed about doing to try and help the agricultural community?
So President Trump announced on the 24th of July a $12 billion aid package for agriculture, and it was registered in the Federal Registry on the 24th of August and just open for sign up today on the 4th of September. Now, you know, I talked earlier about how my family farm has been hit. We feel like $70,000 a month over the last 2 months. The trade, or this $12 billion package that President Trump put into action is gonna help me about $4,000 a month. So the reality is, it sounds like a big number, but it's really not going to help agriculture the way that people think it might, and it's definitely not the kind of subsidy that people think that it might be. And so really what we have to understand about this, I think the most important point is these relationships that we have built as an industry, and all of our industries, are with people. You know, when we talk about trading with Mexico, we're not trading with a country, we're trading with people and businesses in Mexico. And we have those trade relationships that have been built over decades. And when the government gets in the way of this and puts taxes on these kind of things, it ruins and breaks those relationships and gives other people and other businesses in other countries opportunities to come in and take our markets. And it's extremely concerning to me about all the agricultural markets. One thing that we're noticing in our business right now is that the contracts for grain to go to China are extremely, they're just not forward contracting like they normally do. So, you know, China brought in last year, they got 2/3 of their soybeans from the United States. So think about that, 2/3 of their soybeans. They can't find enough soybeans other places in the world to not buy any from us. But if they only buy 1/3 of their soybeans this year, that's going to leave a whole bunch of soybeans back on the market here in the U.S.
And which will get turned into soy milk, which will then compete with your dairy product.
That is going to be a problem.
That's right. And you know, Chad started off the conversation talking about winners and losers. And Ron, I think that some people who are watching this would say, you know what, it's unfortunate for the ag industry, but if the cost of milk is down, if the cost of apples and soybeans is down, is that good for U.S. consumers? And I'd be curious to get your thoughts on how that trade-off works out. And to put that in a little bit of a context, because it's probably not as simple as that.
Well, I don't think it's good for Utah consumers or U.S. consumers, and here's why. The agricultural industry is in its 4th year of depressed prices. We're in the 4th year of our depressed ag economy, and it's tough. It was tough before the tariffs came into place. And you know, agriculture provides something for our community that is intangible. It's not so much an economic value, although the economic value of agriculture in Utah is very big. It's more than that. It's part of our communities. And just imagine a state that has no sweet corn, no local tomatoes, you know, no local dairy and beef. And, you know, I don't want to live in that kind of a state. You know, if all we have is rooftops and we don't have any of our own sustainability, that's something that really scares me.
Right, and in addition to that, you know, the ag industry contributes, what is it? Is that $21.5 billion to the Utah economy? And so you think about healthy farmers, they play a very vital role in communities across the state, and the multiplier effect on what the ag industry is doing accounts to be a very significant driver of economic growth in the state.
There are two issues that brings up, and one of them is, once you lose ag ground, it's really hard to gain it back.
It's impossible.
And so then we permanently become dependent on, we're no longer self-sufficient.
Right.
I think the second point too, just as a wrapping up point, is that most people don't realize that the agricultural input to our state's economy is larger than tourism. Fairly significantly, and I think it's number 2 or number 3 as far as economic impact. Am I correct on that statement?
It's top 5 for sure, Alan. But yeah, I think it is correct. Ron, you would probably know better than anybody.
Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, any last thoughts? We're kind of out of time.
Well, the last thought that I have is, you know, just because you might save a few pennies on your gallon of milk, that's not good for you in the long term. And trade wars are bad. We have to understand that tariffs, you know, we have had countries that have taken advantage of our trading relationships over the years. I personally am grateful to have a president that is trying to fix that. We as an organization disagree with his actions and how he's doing it, but it is refreshing at least to know that people are noticing and trying to help fix this situation that we find ourselves in. We need free trade and we need fair trade.
Yep, I agree with that. And I think one final point, you know, I have not met anybody who disagrees with the objectives, that we need to update NAFTA and find ways to improve it, that we need to hold China accountable for its unfair trade practices. There seems to be unanimous consensus that these are worthy objectives, and the Trump administration is working very hard to accomplish those objectives. What I'm hearing out in the business community here in Utah is that the process by which we are trying to achieve those objectives has a lot of collateral damage. And so we need to make sure we understand the costs of the current approach and ask ourselves, is there a better way of accomplishing these objectives? And that's one thing that we as business leaders need to make sure that we're out front at driving that policy conversation.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Appreciate it very much. We'll be right back with the county seat. When we come back, we are going to go on the ground to look firsthand at how the tariffs already in place are hurting local fruit growers. We'll be right back.